like a learning opportunity, right? For me to talk to everybody who's also been playing around with AI models and building stuff. So we'll be very excited to exchange thoughts. But yeah, Jason, let me know when you feel like it's ready
Yeah.
to kick off.
We normally just go straight
Happy to
into
start
it.
anytime.
So I will hand over to you for you to take over and start sharing. And maybe give us a like intro a little bit, and then you can
Okay.
like start diving into the interesting part.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll just give a quick intro about myself again, and I'll dive into the product that I launched recently. And I think the topic for today is really how do you launch a B2B SaaS product end to end? What kind of tech stack we're going to be using? How do you talk to customers? But yeah, my background was in machine learning. So I basically learned full stack development myself because from a statistics degree from UCL in London first, and then later I went to MIT to study operations research. So it's all about optimization of machine learning. Started my career as a data scientist at CVS Health, which is one of the pharmacies in the US, and then at Google for a bit, and then Walmart for a bit. And then I think it was right before I joined Walmart, ChatGPT was launched. And I suddenly realized that everything that you could do in a Google team or in a Walmart team could just be done. Like people take a month to ship something, and then you realize that it takes no more than 2 days. But I realized, okay, it's time to get out of there and then start building. Yeah, man. So it's been an exciting time. And I moved to the UK because I joined a startup incubator here last year. It's called Antler. I'm not working on the same idea as last year's idea at the incubator. Things have changed quite a bit. As many of you who might know, if you're a startup founder, like you just keep pivoting. But I'm going to jump into the product and give you a quick demo. And I hope that we can focus a bit more on the tech side and also on the customer communication side of things, so that hopefully it'll be helpful for many of you who are interested in building startups in the future. Cool. Let me just share my screen. Oh, as Jason mentioned, one last thing. I also have a YouTube channel if you guys are interested. It's called yt.seanchen.io. I basically share my story, started from building startups and now focus more on sharing what kind of tech tools I'm using and AI system design,
Nice.
all these kind of stuff. Let me share my screen.
Yeah.
Can people see my screen?
Yeah.
With a whiteboard here. Okay. Okay, cool. So the topic here today is how do you launch a full stack B2B SaaS? And I'll show you my own startup as an example. Very straightforward. I'm an engineer, so I like to talk very straightforwardly. We use backend and database. My front end is all pure Next.js, Tailwind CSS. And then there's a lot of like context management, data layer sharing, and then setting up APIs on the front end. For example, how do you set up payments with Stripe? In the backend, I dedicatedly use FastAPI because I most of the time only set up my AI agents in the backend. What I mean by that is that AI agents and database manipulations in the backend. If it's a simple API call, I usually just do it in Next.js because it's much more straightforward. And then my database, I switched from Firebase to Supabase. Like Firebase used to be a thing. And then these days when I talk to tech people, nobody's using Firebase. If you use Firebase, let me know. Happy to chat. So this is my tech stack basically. And then I'll jump into my product and explain to you what the problem I'm trying to solve. And then we can come back to some of these tech stuff to sort of dive deeper into it. Can I ask who used HubSpot here? Anybody has tried HubSpot before or any CRM tools? Thank you. Okay. Yes, Jason. So basically, long story short, I met this pilot customer in Texas who was using HubSpot in his factory, which does silicon fabrication. And it was a funny story. Like I was posting an open source project on Twitter, and then he found out my Twitter post, and then we talked a lot, and he realized that we both AI. And then he told me about his pain of using HubSpot. Basically, any factories or anyone who sell physical products, if they do sales that have a ton of back and forth, like if you're not like just selling an iPhone, you're selling something like silicon fabrication, meaning that if Ford approached them, their car window is a completely different thing compared to Toyota. Or if you're like an aerospace engineering company, right? If you want some silicon fabrication there, that'll be a different model. So you gotta talk to these businesses with a ton of emails, and their sales reps are basically very busy with just integrating with CRMs, and they, as far as I heard, a lot of pain points is that they're doing double work. right? Double work means that they finish the conversation during the daytime, they finish all the emails, and then they got to summarize everything in their head and then fill it in into HubSpot. That's all everything started. So we launched this product called AutoManus. Just pull it up real quick. So we're an AI sales agent for people selling physical products. Silicon fabrication is one of them. We also pilot with people selling things like building materials, like wood floors, cabinetries. And we also spoke to people who run apparel factories. So recently, a lot more was like EV cars, electric vehicles, because there are a ton of models for electric vehicle sales. When the SKUs are unpredictable, like there are just going to be a ton of models being shipped or built in EVs all the time, then sales becomes a lot more complicated. So I'm going to dive into the product now. The product is basically, I just go into dashboard. Just like every SaaS product is a dashboard. Every SaaS product is a wrapper around AWS, which is a wrapper around NVIDIA. So in our case, we're using Supabase. Supabase is a wrapper around AWS as well. So in this dashboard, basically, you show the business what key metrics they want to see, what are the active leads, how many orders are won, how many orders are lost, win rates, all these kind of stuff. And then very directly, you can see the to-dos for the rest of the week or month. What are some of the things that are overdue, in progress, completed? What are some recent activities? Who are your top customers? Who are the top products? So if I click on this thing called Leads Hub, it shows me every lead that this business currently have. Let's say if I expand on this one, it shows me a timeline of when was the first contact, which is August 20th, and when was the target date for shipping the product, which is September 23rd. And then there are 4 pillars here below that. One of them is called recent journal, which shows me like all the previous activities that we have had or conversations we had with the customer, and a ton of to-do list, sample tracking status, product that they're interested in. So basically it's like an overview of your sales leads. So you guys might be wondering, where is the AI? So I'll show you the AI now. And so the AI comes from how do you parse information in a structured way from your communication channels like emails or WhatsApp or messaging channels, so that you don't have to do the double work to filling the CRMs yourself, right? So we have a button here called the create lead. If you're a new user, there will be nothing here. So this call to action button will be very clear. So you click on that. So I will show you a modal here where for some people like who don't know about this product, they can just try to type in whatever customer notes you had or speak to it. Behind this is a whisper from OpenAI. The demo I want to show you is through this email tab. So if I click on this email tab, you can see that I'm already connected with my Gmail, my company email, which is shangchen.io. And then if I pick on one of the emails, which is a sales lead from this company who sells silicone gasket, and normally if you're a sales representative, you'll be like, okay, I got a quote request, and I'll be like manually typing things into my CRM system. But in our case, we just click on generate with AI, and then it's basically going to run through a multi-agent system here. The first thing it's going to detect is that, oh, this email is sent from a Gmail. Well, because I sent that email from my Gmail, so he detected it. It's not the same as Blue Horizon Solar, this company name. But let's say I just know it, so I just say proceed anyways. Otherwise, you can just block it and prevent that from happening. And that's another thing from real customer interview. Like one of our sales rep in our pilot told us that there are always a ton of fake emails asking for quotes. They might be from the competitor side, they might be just making things up. But yeah, so this was like the first defense line. And then you can see that it's going through the lead extraction, duplication check, and then CRM integration, all these kind of stuff. If this internet runs smoothly, then it should show me the result. If it's not showing me the result, then let me just refresh this real quick and do this one more time. All right, guys. Sometimes things happen. Create lead, email, choose this, generate with AI.
I like the interaction of selecting the email.
Let's try one more time.
It's pretty cool.
Oh, thanks. Better integration is needed here because now you can just only pull in emails. We're working on letting people to send out emails, like reply to emails in this channel so that they don't have to go back and forth with their email boxes. So Before I do this, I saw a question there saying, what are you using for agentic layer, Sean? Oh, okay. I'm not sure how you guys feel about it, but like, I normally just build everything myself because there's a lot more flexibility. And I played around a lot with LangChain, LangGraph, all these stuff. Actually started from watching Jason's video. I think Jason had a video about that. Like you were walking through a Jupyter
Yeah, I
notebook or
have
something. Yeah, I think that was it. I started from there. And then later I just realized that you can just ask what agentic like system you want. And then as long as you prompt it properly, usually Claude 4 is pretty accurate for capturing it. Yes, Ben, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess I'm building something quite similar as part of a larger system, and we use ingest for doing kind of async workflows on the back end, and we are torn between using Mastra for the agentic side of things, so we're all TypeScript, so no Python on our side, or just using ingest's agent kit, so like a little bit of abstraction, but still using the AI SDK for prompting. So yeah, we've got quite a mix. I was just curious what you were using.
Oh, great. And also based in the UK. Oh, you're in Kent.
Yep.
Nice. Yeah. Not good weather today in England. But
gross,
thanks for joining.
Yeah, pleasure.
Cool. Let me finish this and then I'll come back to the questions.
Yes,
so,
that's it, Jason. That's the one.
Yeah. So we got the contact information, company information, the deal information, product requirements. It captures what product the customer wants. And there's a CRM integration as well, which I'll show you in a bit. Actually, let me just click on this. All right, I'll open that tab over there and I'll come back to it later. So let's just create the lead now. I think the session expires somehow. As a startup founder, I have no shame of rerunning the demo again, just in front of everyone. So sometimes the session expires and it doesn't work anymore. But this time, when this pops up, I'm just gonna create generate and it should work. If it doesn't work, that means that I have
Is this like doing a structure output from OpenAI to do those data extraction?
It's doing the data extraction through basically like you need to prompt it properly so that it understood like what kind of a quotation email or message would look like. And also it's highly tied to how we store information here for each sales lead. So for example, like if I click on, by the way, this is newly generated from this Blue Horizon Solar. And then the first contact day is today, September 14th. And if I click on view all, so I have a few tabs here. The first email will be stored here automatically. And then there's a to-do list, which was extracted from that too. So Jason, back to your question, like the structure really is linked to how businesses use this product. So if they have specific tasks, for example, like you need to follow up with the customer on the status of the quote, you need to send a revised quote about certain things, then we need to, basically you need to define the types correctly so that you can output it and then store it in Supabase, and then our front end can query it. So you can also see the product that we captured here. And I can also add a product here. I can say, okay, I don't know, whatever, other. And I'll just say Ford window gasket. Let's say it's $5,000. And I'm seriously interested in that. If I add interest, you can see that we're breaking it down, the product interest by percentages, so that if today I finished 20 calls on my team, and then Sean suddenly called me, I just be like, oh, Sean just called me. Let me check out what was our last conversation with Sean. Oh, okay, Sean sent me this email, and okay, I still have a few to-dos with Sean. And then, okay, Sean's interested in this silicone gasket for molded silicone gasket and for Ford window gasket. So immediately I have this information up to date to myself, and then I can just hop on a call with my customer and talk to them. There's a demo feature here about AI on top of that as well, which I was trying to copy cursor, which is on the right-hand side. Everybody now put a cursor chat on the right-hand side. It tells me about the performance of this entire sales hub. But if I click on this sparkle icon, and now's the fun part. The UI is screwed up a little bit somehow. I don't have the upper half of the screen, but it's okay. It summarized the leads. So it told me, like, it looks like a chat, but actually there's quite a lot of, you got to share the data to the agents on the right-hand side so that it knows like what's the context here, right? So now this one knows that my entire deal is 23,000. Yeah, value is $23,000. And then I can just ask it like, oh, what are my most urgent to-dos for this lead? I selected on this specific sales lead. So you can imagine that we did a bit of, how do you call this? There's a bit of ID matching here, right? When I say this lead, it's like only pulling information about this lead. And it's going to tell me what to-dos they have here. Bit of feedback to myself is that this chat is too small and this upper half screen is gone. And then I can maybe link this, maybe I can structure this in a more into bullet points instead of a paragraph. But at least so far the architecture works, which is something we talked about: context management, data layers. These things all really matter quite a lot. And the way to do that is that if you guys are familiar with Next.js, you basically have this context. You can just wrap your context around your layout, right? Just always make sure that when you do data pulling, write it in one data context.tsx and then wrap it around this entire app so that regardless of where you are in the components, like now I'm in this table and here I'm on this cursor chat, they all share the same data layers. Yeah, and then two very final things. I don't want to overcomplicate this conversation. One thing is that I have these won or lost sections. So if I come back here and I say, okay, this lead is lost, I just click on lost, move to lost, and it's gone. All right. And I can move it back if I want to. Last but not least, so remember I said that I was talking about CRMs. So if I come over here, you can see that we also wrote this into HubSpot, exactly the same deal, $18,000. We add another 5,000 for Ford. That's why we haven't pushed the new information here. But this one was auto-generated from the original parsing. And then you have the original node, which is from the email. And we're also capturing like who's the contact, what was the company. You can click onto the company to see their information as well. So this is if your team, if a factory is already using HubSpot or Salesforce or whatever, Odoo, all these CRM tools, you don't want to say, hey, stop using HubSpot, stop using Salesforce. They probably paid $2 million on that for a long-term deal already. What they really want is that, how can you help me make my job easier? So with these teams, I just say, hey, you don't need to type everything in. I just click, everything's written in for you. And if you are happy with AutoManus, always come back here. We're going to iterate on these agentic experience here. Just like we're building on top of these CRM tools if they are already CRM users. But a lot of businesses, so this pilot customer I was talking about, their scale is pretty big. They have 200, 300 people in the factory, like annual revenues, I think 70 or 80 million. But a lot of businesses are a lot smaller than that, don't use any CRMs, they use Excel. So this will be like a huge upgrade for them. So I'm just trying to be inclusive here for what kind of customers I speak with. But yeah, like it's still a very early stage product. You can see that we can't really send information to customer from here. And WhatsApp's still a fake demo here. It's not working yet. Only Gmail works. And CRM, you can pull in information as well. There's a CRM sync. Yeah, if I click on sync now, it's going to pull in all the deals from my CRM into my leads, right? It pulled in a bunch of stuff just now from there. So it makes it easier for people to onboard. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this product. Just see. I think that's it for this product demo. If I come back to this initial conversation, basically anything you saw with AI was done through FastAPI, and you just set up FastAPI with AI agents, and then it's an API, host it on Google Cloud, and then make sure your front end can talk to it. And then your front end basically is just make sure I think the most important thing is that make sure you always come back to your code and refactor it when it's very complex. And make sure whenever you share data or subscribe to your database, share the data layers in one place. And that's pretty much it in order to launch a SaaS product. Last but not least, these are my own repo that I use most of the time. So this one is for the front end, and this one is for the back end. I'll just ping it in the Google Meet. It's all open source. The first one is basically a template that you can set up Next.js, Supabase, but most importantly, you can do a Stripe subscription here. So our product here, you can check out the Stripe subscription over here, right? Because I already subscribed, so I'm a subscribed user. So it's going to save you a lot of time, completely free. If you're interested, you can try it out. Backend, completely nothing here except a Docker file. This Docker file basically just helps me to deploy this to Google Cloud very quickly. So whenever I build AI agents, I just this backend and then start iterating on my cursor or Cloud Code. Cool, Jason. I talked too much.
Thanks a lot
I probably should shut up now.
Thanks a lot for sharing.
That's
Sean.
about it.
Super interesting product, and good luck with all the progress so far. I think there are a few questions in the chat, but I might kick off one. I think this one thing you mentioned in terms of like, because you have an agent chat on the right side, and you talk about like how do you bring context to the agent effectively, and you mentioned something about like the Next.js data context. Can you like expand a bit more on that part as well?
Yeah, sure. Wait, so in what direction do you expand on?
Yeah, you mentioned something about like the
context,
Next.js
Jason?
data context. That part I'm not familiar with, so I was just quite curious, how did that part work?
Oh, sure. Let me see if I can pull out an example. Oh, yeah, look at this. So this Git repo right now, if you click on context, so normally you guys know like how we ensure that regardless of where you are, your product always know that you logged in with your Gmail initially, right? That's because we have this authentication context. And this authentication context, I didn't write any line of code here, by the way. It's all AI generated. So if you are not familiar with this, don't get freaked out. You just need to understand how it works, right? So this auth context, I'm just using this as an example and then can move on to the agent. This auth context is basically saying, okay, Sean used Supabase to log in with Gmail already, right? And then I'm going to create this thing called an authentication provider. What this one does is that it takes as input your product, which is the children, and then the output is basically everything that wrapped around after you wrap this authorization provider on top of it. You can see what happens is that you basically are checking in Supabase if this guy has subscribed, stuff like that, right? And the way you use this is that it's in your app folder, and then I think depends on at what layer you are. So normally we just wrap it around layout.tsx, right? So you can see the authentication providers right here. So anything that's wrapped in the middle will have all access to information that's shared in these wrappers, right? So here, my children shares information about what kind of URLs I'm being protected from, where am I being authorized, and I always have access to that. If you use post hoc, then you have post hoc here. And then in our case, what I meant by data context for AI agent is that imagine here, let's come back here to the lead. Let me turn on the sidebar one more time. So imagine now on the right-hand side, imagine this is a component, right? As a component, it needs to have the right access to the right data. Otherwise, it's going to summarize the entire leads hub, which could be 200, 300 leads. That would be overflow. So in order to do that, then you can imagine that because we click on this one, right? So this one is sharing whatever leads ID here as a context to anything that's wrapped around it, right? So over here, we'll only have access to data that has this lead ID. And because we might have created a context for leads information, we'll wrap it around the layout so that even if this component does not have direct data connection to it, because it's within the main pages, it will have access to it. I'm not sure if I explained that clearly.
Like you probably have a context for the leads selected, and then bring that context to the chat component. That makes sense.
Yeah, totally. There could be better ways. It just what works for me so far. Let's see. Ben left for cooking dinner. Cool. Let me see if I missed any questions here. Okay, just start from the beginning. I spoke to Ben already. MBN Everday said, I'm actually working on doing something similar, parsing data with agents. Have you experienced doing it in bulk? Are you still here every day? What do you mean by in bulk?
Assume it's probably something about like parsing, let's say not just one email, but thousands of email to do the data extraction in bulk?
That makes sense. Yes. So right now, I allow people to choose multiple emails and they can process it. But one thing that like promised my pilot customer is that when you're sleeping at 2 a.m., we're going to auto process these emails, which is going to be in bulk. But that feature hasn't been built yet. You got to sell first before you build. Okay, next one. Ben, I already spoke with Ben. Dmitry Jakov. In Supabase, do you use a separate DB or do you use, let me just pull it up here so you guys can see what am I doing. Wait, hold on. In Supabase, do you use a separate DB or do you use prefixes to distinguish between projects? When you say distinguish between projects, do you mean like different products?
Let me explain. So
yes, please.
In Supabase, you can create a separate project for each SaaS, or you can have only one and distinguish between projects using prefixes. This way you can spend less, because if you create a new project in Supabase, you are going to be charged. I guess it's $10 per each per month. In my case, I usually add prefixes, and obviously in terms of visibility, it might not be the best choice, but at least I can save money. What I'm wondering is if you're using the same schema or you're just create a separate Supabase project for each SaaS application you are coding.
Right. I'm creating separate projects, but it's because I got some credits from my previous incubator, but I'm running out of it soon. So this is a good reminder. I feel like for free tiers, they allow quite a lot of projects, no? Or you can just create a new account.
Yeah, that's another interesting idea.
Yeah. I have 10 Gmails, bro. I can just register 10 different
You can
Supabase.
create different orgs, I think, as well, Dimitri.
Yeah, you can create different orgs as well. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I didn't know about this option.
Okay. Do you think you can vibe code this type of product? Vibe coded the whole thing, by the way. But I think it depends on how you define vibe code, right? Like my definition of vibe code is not, okay, I'm just gonna listen to music and then hit run, hit fix it. It doesn't work. You need to be very specific about what you say, what you prompt. Like for example, if I don't tell my AI, if I don't tell Cursor or Claude Code that build this AI agent data sharing mechanism like what I said, they might not do it. And then that might mess up the whole system. So I need to be very specific and tell it and be like, hey, whenever you pull in data from Supabase, please use all the functionalities in that context.tsx. Don't go anywhere else. And then always reuse the same function. Do not rebuild the wheels. So you need to be like always asking AI to do exactly what you want, which I think doesn't always fit into the public concept of what vibe coding is. Because vibe coding, I don't know if you guys seen some like Instagram reels recently, like making fun of interns in tech companies vibe coding, and then they're just listen to rock music and then not paying attention to the code base. You can't really do that. Things get messy very quickly.
So then that means I'd have to learn coding too as well to know exactly, or do you think I can just iterate, like just tell it what I want, and then if it's not doing what I need it, just tell it to self-diagnose the issue as I come up with it?
I think one strategy to have is just firstly build whatever you want. And then whenever you feel like, hey, when I say fix it, it doesn't fix it. Okay, that's the time for me to pause and think again. And then what I would recommend you do in that situation is you just start a new chat, right? Don't include any back history. Start a new chat and then just be like, okay, explain to me what this code base is doing, right? Explain to me what architecture makes sense, what architecture is overcomplicated. Are you overcomplicating things? Are you rebuilding the wheels, stuff like that? And if yes, then please help me clean things up. So it's a good habit to have, like to clean up your code base once every week or once every 2 weeks. And that's another way to learn how to vibe code with proper prompting, I think. That answered your question.
Yeah, I think if you what I'm imagining from your answer just now is that if I imagine myself as the project manager that can't code, the cloud is basically the coder. If I ask it the correct questions, then basically I can lead it to where I need it to do, right?
Yeah. If you basically tell it what you need, to be honest, I think that should be on the product roadmap for every vibe code app, which is doesn't matter how vague my user's questions are. I need to make sure we help them break it down into things that the code generator would understand and ask clarification questions back to you. But for you as a user, yes, you need to tell it what you want, but also you need to learn by, number one, cleaning up your code base consistently, so that you get to learn a bit about like how software engineers structure their code base. And the second, you just better prompts over time, or be very specific. Like you can tell it what to do, right? That's the goal. If you can tell it what to do, then the hallucination, from my experience, will decrease significantly.
Okay.
Okay, no worries. Okay, Ben's gone. Dimitri's here. Already spoke. Okay, Hono, have you set up any agents in Claude you'd recommend trying out or could share? I have not. I assume you meant, if you're still here, I assume you meant
Sub
code.
agents. Yeah.
Claude agents.
Yeah, like sub agents.
I have not, sorry.
You're good.
All right. Okay, so could you explain what tools you use to code this app? I use Cursor pretty much dedicatedly. I tried Cloud Code. I don't know. Cloud Code doesn't tell me where it's changing my files. I saw some people tell me that Cloud Code, you can set up some plugins in the VS Code editor, but somehow I already became a deep user of Cursor. I guess people are lazy. So if you use Cloud Code, do you set up your own agents? Not yet. Okay, everyone's talking about it. I should do that. I should try it. Do you use sub agents? No, I don't. Sorry to disappoint you guys. Okay, Dimitri again. Do you use memory bank, BMAT method, or something like this kind? No, sorry, I don't. When you say memory bank, do you mean like short memories?
Yeah, Cursor memory bank, which includes orchestration, like in raw code, top line, or kilocode, and it has also the memory management based on MD files. There is separate folder with a very interesting structure from the files, and also it has cursor rules, MDC, which and it has also separate roles. So basically, it structures the way you generate code. You have van mode, plan mode, specify mode, and stuff like this.
That one I think I tried before.
Very interesting.
As well. There's like simple version of memory bank and also more complicated version. I think the one you mentioned had multiple different mode is like more sophisticated version. I feel like in general for all the projects I try, it's just normally the simplest architecture almost always work better. So I end up actually using the more simpler version where I just use like doc file to MD file to like manage context. The BMAT methods, I think they are getting really popular recently. I'm actually just trying out yesterday. That one was really cool. Where they were, I assume you're talking about this one, right? This GitHub BMAT code org.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Because before I was using codeguide.dev in order to create the PRD implementation plan and all other documents. But with BMAT, you can create those documents using GPT.
Yeah, they're getting very popular recently. I'm trying. It's almost like a kind of a alternative for like Taskmaster before as well, but it introduced different kind of like checkpoint in terms of genuine PRD.
Yeah, but it also can help you to create the PRD itself.
Oh wow.
PRD implementation, etc. This is the major difference. Because even with memory bank and all other, those are implementation stuff. But BMAT can help you to create the documentation.
Gotcha. Did you find like the result good from your early experimentation?
Yeah, I like it, but still it's easier for me to use codeguide.dev because I'm just used to. You need to pay for this service.
Okay. By the way, this sounds exactly what my previous colleague does. So this is going to replace their job. Transform these detailed plans to hyper detailed development stories into every dev agent needs. That's basically a Scrum Master.
Yeah.
It's built as a Scrum Master
Yeah,
agent.
but you still need to make a research. Using this method, you create a PRD based on your research.
I see. I don't know how you guys feel, but when I was a PM, I feel like when I work with engineers, nobody's gonna read those like gigantic amount of documents in Jira and Confluence. Nobody's gonna read it. Like people pretend they're reading it, people pretend they're busy. But eventually, if you show people something that works and everyone gets excited, if you show people a bunch of documentations, people are like, oh, we have priorities. So I feel like this job needs to be automated quite a bit.
I think
and now
interesting part is you brought up
do it.
like when back then PM write PRD and no one read it, even an engineer basically won't look at PRD, but because everyone is developed through Cloud Code now, Cloud Code will read every single word in your PRD. So that's where the PRD actually became more and more important and interesting. And a lot of like, I think the recent trend is like to be more aligned on spec generation. That's why I feel like BMSs, stuff like that, it became a bit more popular. Yeah.
So you're basically saying anyone who has very detailed documentation on the specs in the past now has an advantage because they have a lot more data to process so that their coding agent or their engineers have more context.
Sorry, go on.
But you can...
Go
on, Jason.
I was just saying that it depends whether the document is like outdated or not. If they're outdated, then it won't help too much. I was more talking about like this doc is actually like a lot of vibe coding I see is more around like doc generation and spec generation. And compared with old days, no one cared about those docs. But now it actually became quite important because Cloud will read every single word of it.
Yeah. And I think that is, I was talking a couple of weeks ago about using this technology with legacy code bases. And definitely the way I've made it work is by getting the documentation really slick. And now we're seeing some really interesting developments on that front for building out documentation in an automated fashion. So we're simplifying that process dramatically.
Amazing.
I put a link into the chat. There's a really interesting from the Latent Space podcast, most recent episode, which Sean, I think everybody is going to find that really interesting. But there's a lot of discussion about agents, frameworks, controlling, moving away from a lot of scaffolding around products as the LLMs are getting more and more intelligent, and a fascinating set of discussions, very current, very up to date, worth checking out. I think you'll find some interesting ideas in that.
Nice.
So cool.
Looks really good.
Thanks for sharing.
I will put that I was going to put this into the general chat as well, Jason, just so that everybody can pick up on it. But I think it's one of those, it's like an engineer talking about engineering for engineers, like no bullshit, just all about engineering and referring to other talks that are about engineering, which are really current. And it's like the state of the art of building agentic systems. And then there's a very interesting discussion, Sean, picking up on your point about frameworks. Lance, who's in LangChain and is quite pro framework, he also argues, but you don't have to build it with a framework, to your point. You can build these systems without any frameworks. But in a bigger organization, that's a really interesting point he makes. In a bigger organization where they're looking for standardization, they're looking for documentation, they're looking for people's understanding to come along, that's where they're arguing the benefit of a framework. And I would, for having worked in larger organizations as customers, I would say, I can really see that. Something to ponder, but well worth listening to that.
I think Lance has a lot of good stuff. I've been watching a lot of his videos, and I did hear recently, actually, a lot of enterprises adopting those frameworks for like LangChain, which I didn't understand before, but what you mentioned makes sense.
Funny story. Like when I speak to a lot of engineers or startup founders, especially, most people would tell me we don't use frameworks. Frameworks are overrated. But when I speak to businesses, a lot of businesses, they are big fans of LangChains, LangGraphs. And the reason was very similar to what you said, Simon. I think they prefer frameworks for a few reasons. I think standardization is one thing, documentation, which means that they could get a lot more support in the future. Either they hire consultants or they recruit people. Right? For business owners, they just feel like this is more familiar to them and they feel like they can get more support. And on the other hand, I don't know how frameworks will monetize eventually. If they just open source, they'll never make money. So I feel like their monetization incentive is how can I serve these big enterprises well? And I don't know, this is probably the new Salesforce for our current era, where like in the future, there will be a lot of AI focused consulting firms doing like forward deployment work for businesses or help them to integrate with LangChain well. And these standardization would really help like these consultants do things fast because they're not like dealing with self-built agents for every company. Like if they're familiar with several frameworks, it should be sufficient. Yeah, I think for B2B, maybe it's a very different competitive landscape for frameworks.
Yeah, it certainly made sense. And also they've got lots of tooling around them now, like LangChain, you can see inside it. And you don't have to build any of that stuff. So you get it for free. So you can see your costs, you can see where you can save money by architecting your memory better and blah, 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 blah. Those kinds of continual improvements, because running costs is going to be where it's going to bite people. There's also a really interesting discussion about bringing forward development engineers. I don't know if you've picked up on this trend in Silicon Valley that because agents are so domain specific and so intense, and there is skill in developing them, that there seems to be this popularity of these forward development engineers who go in and actually build the agent's architecture as not a consulting assignment, but as an extending the product assignment. And then I was listening to this very interesting discussion from one of the big software vendors whose name's gone blank, but they're a multi-billion dollar organization. And they pioneered forward development engineers, and they then built out their software by bringing the technology that was being built for customer X and then taking it across to customer, the next 5 customers, and leveraging that knowledge that they were gaining and cross-pollinating. I certainly have had similar experience in my first software business of doing something like that, not as slickly as they were describing it. And we certainly didn't exit at a multi-billion dollar
actually,
valuation.
in my last startup, 6 months, my main job was setting up for deploy engineer team, like for the last period. It's actually, I think interesting. Like if you didn't execute well, which most companies do, even for my last team, is that the business became really gnarly business. You basically super service heavy, but it's also necessary because all each company requirement is different. You can't deploy without them. But say like pre-AI, this type of business is not good business. Like it's too service heavy. But if you have to figure out a right of workflow to empower those people, and each forward deployment solution engineer can actually serve maybe 10, 20 different customers, then it could be a really good business. But yeah, it's pretty gnarly process, I would say. It's not like a straightforward. Yeah.
I was speaking with some people working at Sierra AI recently.
Yeah, customer support agent.
Heard of them?
Yeah.
I was just Googling them. They raised 350 million recently, 10 billion valuation. And I think so basically I confirmed with them that they currently just do Palantir style consulting to their clients.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong about that, right? As you guys said, it's incredibly easy now to ship something, but you got to have someone who knows the domain and the context. So you can send an agentic product manager over to your client side, then shipping it in, I don't know, a couple of weeks time, testing it for a couple of weeks time, within a month or 2 already live. Then that's like a very profitable business because it immediately can move on to the next business. And they internally are building this thing called Agent Studio, which is basically an SDK that if they serve enough businesses, say in logistics, they might have seen exactly the same problem. So they just use the same thing they internally design and build and then go ahead and deploy. But yeah, I really think that previously, as Jason said, these business model doesn't scale that well. But now, because everyone can move so fast, it suddenly becomes scalable.
Well, so it was the guy who was talking on this podcast was one of the leads from Frontier, and what he said is that it took a lot of discipline and a lot of careful recruiting to bring in forward deployment engineer types as against product engineer types, and it took a lot of trust building and discipline to actually bring the technology discoveries that the forward deployment engineers were making back into the business so that then the software could expand. But Palantir seemed to have done a reasonably good job
one
of
of the
that.
best company executed really well. Yeah, but that makes sense.
Yep.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, he did say execution was absolutely mission critical. The outcome that we're after, scalability.
Nice. If you still remember that podcast, please send me. I'd love to watch as well.
Yeah,
awesome. Good discussion in the end, and thanks a lot for sharing and coming, Sean. I really appreciate it. And good luck with the product.
Yeah,
Let us
of course.
know if anything we can help with. I don't know how many of the community members in manufacturing industry, but feel free to just post a link in the community as well. We'll just have people try it out if they're in the industry.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for inviting me, Jason. You're one of the biggest inspirations out there on AI. So kudos to you. Thanks for bringing together this crew.
Thank you.
Amazing discussion.
The community is amazing. And awesome. Thanks a lot, Sean, again. And
and thanks Jinqi for organizing. Jinqi Mao is the man behind the scene. He was.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for organizing this.
No problem. So we're looking forward to next session. If you have any upgrade your product or any new shares, so we can maybe hold you next for maybe October or November stuff. Thank you, Sean.
All right.
Thanks,
guys. See you next week.
Okay.
Bye.